Hey, it's Steve McMaster with CQ Gamebirds again. We're going to start a cooking series again. And thank goodness for Apron Strings. They're allowing us to come in and use their kitchen, which is a lot nicer than doing it at my house. So this is Jan. Jan is going to give us a quick walk around Apron Strings and see what's going on sale for the state fair. You need to come over down to First South Main in Hutchinson and check out the store, and they also have a booth at the fairgrounds. So we're going to go on inside and check out Apron Strings. So how many aprons do you guys normally have here?
As many as we can possibly fit into the store.
As many as you can fit in the store. I see the displays. I really like them.
Thank you. We have gotten some new things in just recently. We have some Day of the Dead platters and wine or oil bottles to complement, and we also have great cookbooks that are for all types of cooking.
You like New England soup? There's one for it.
There you go.
So, due to the fact the state fair is in town, I imagine Apron Strings has something on sale.
We do. We have several things on sale. Let me show you the swilling knife that we have on sale back here. This is a 7-inch chef's knife. That is a very good all-purpose knife for chopping of vegetables, cutting meats. Any type of prep work you might have would be very doable with this.
I see that you guys have a whole bunch of selections of knives here as well. Pretty nice selection of pretty much anything kitchen-wise you would need. These pots over here, what are these exactly?
The ballerini pots are perfect for people who like non-stick. They don't want them really heavy. These are a composite, and they can be washed in the dishwasher. You can use metal utensils on them, and they are a really, really good price point. And we are running a special on this small one during the fair as well.
Cool. So what we'll do is we're going to have a lot of cooking shows here at Apron Strings, and we just touched a very small portion of what they have to offer. So right now we're going to pause the video and get ready to go cook.
There you go.
Hello, it's Steve McMaster with CQ Gamebirds. We're going to start our cooking series again. Over the next year, we are going to start getting food from across the U.S. and trying to show everyone the opportunities you have through buying and having next day delivery of food. Fresh food, it isn't that expensive, and you can have some pretty fantastic meals even in central Kansas where we live. Like always, if you guys are ever interested in coming down for a upland game hunt in Kansas, CQ Gamebirds is definitely an option we'd like you to consider. Today, we're going to cook walleye chowder and walleye with balsamic roasted tomatoes, cherry tomatoes. These meals, the walleye are fresh caught by Gary Parks, who is here with us today, and he is going to be able to enjoy the meal he caught because he's donating the fish to us today, and he's going to get to sit here and give us a hard time as we go through this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with a walleye chowder because it takes the longest. The first thing it calls for is for you to cook off 5 pieces of bacon. So we're going to start cooking that bacon off real quick. And as you see here, Apron Strings has quite a little kitchen. They do several cooking classes. So if you are someone in the Reno County area that is looking for a cooking class, this would be a good place to go. Now the bacon, I'm using the same pot that I'm going to cook the chowder in to do the bacon, because whenever you cook bacon, there's always something left on the bottom, and I hate to waste it. So what we'll do is we'll cook this bacon off. Then as soon as we get that cooked off, we're going to throw in 3 tablespoons of butter, a ½ cup of celery, 1 large onion, 4 cups of milk, 2 cups of red tomatoes. So while that's cooking there, I'm going to go ahead and quarter out these tomatoes, or potatoes, not tomatoes, sorry. Yeah, I know. Too busy thinking about the next dish. So Gary, where did you catch these walleye at?
Canopolis Reservoir.
And did you catch those in the spring?
Yes.
Yeah. See, part of the thought of having walleye this time of year, it's September, and fall's coming on. Walleye get a lot more active in the fall, don't they, Gary?
They do.
So, with this being said, we're going to cook 2 more of a wintry style dishes. I realize cherry tomatoes are more of a summer vegetable that you get out of your garden. But the good thing about this is, October, your garden might still be going in Kansas. And you might be able to utilize the last of your cherry tomatoes on this next dish. Potatoes, they're coming out of the ground all summer and fall long. So, and chowder is definitely a winter dish. So hopefully, if you have any, and the good thing is we're using walleye. You can use any really white meated, firm white meated fish for this dish, and it'll work great. You don't want to use a real soft fish because a soft meated fish, that meat will fall apart in the chowder and won't stay together, and then you're not really getting a chowder, you're getting something else. Mush. A mushy soup instead of a nice thick chowder. And as you can tell, it takes a little bit of time to cut these potatoes. So Gary, I understand you have a bird dog.
I do.
So
German short-haired pointer.
German short-haired pointer. I have German short-haired pointers. They're fun.
Good dogs.
Good dogs. You train your dog with NAFTA, don't you?
Navda, yes.
Navda.
Yep, I do.
So, what all do you guys do? Explain that NAVDA trials and everything to me.
Well, NAVDA stands for the North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association, and I took my dog Memorial Day weekend to his natural abilities test.
Really?
And they actually evaluate your puppy. They can be up to 16 months old. They evaluate your puppy on 7 inherent characteristics that the puppies have. And Aldo did great. He maxed out his score and got a prize 1 award for it. So,
oh, that's amazing.
Yep, he did really good. I was real pleased.
That is amazing.
And currently I'm working on the 2nd level of testing, utility prep test, and it requires a lot of waterfowl work. So I've been swimming him. I've got a couple of ducks that I've purchased and have been feeding currently. I've been waiting for it to cool down a little bit so I can start working with him in the water. But they have to do a duck search. They have to do a track a duck drag. They do duck retrieve. And then they do the upland work as well. They actually have to work in a brace as well too. So a brace is where you work with a couple other dogs and they have to honor points.
That's pretty neat. Real quick, what we're going to do now is we're going to add the butter. We're going to get that melted down. And just to let you guys know, if you want this recipe, I can very simply send that to you. Just send me your information. I have it printed out. We have this stored. right here, and if you're really good, I won't have to send anything to you. That tells you exactly how to make the walleye chowder. So now that the butter's melted, what we're going to do is we are going to add the celery and the chopped onion. That celery is a 1/2 cup celery and 1 large chopped onion. And as soon as they start to caramelize, good, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the flour into there. And what that is I've already got the flour separated out. It's a 1/4 cup of flour for this recipe. Okay? And you're going to notice my volumes aren't quite as large as what you're thinking they should be, because I'm cutting this recipe in half, because I'm really only feeding myself and Gary and my wife, who's running the camera. And this walleye chowder actually feeds 6 people. I really don't want to make that much chowder right now. So while this is doing that, I'm going to take the potatoes, which have been washed and cleaned and diced, put them in this bowl here, and I am going to get the walleye fillets out. The recipe calls for 2 8-ounce fillets of walleye. Okay? We're going to have more than a couple fillets, but these fillets are not 8 ounces. They're a little smaller. People up north, where this recipe actually comes from, walleye are a lot more abundant and have a tendency to be a lot larger. Okay? And they can catch larger fish using those walleye. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the walleye over here real quick. Rinse them off. Give them a little squeeze to get the water out of them. Come back over here. And then it says to cut your walleye into chunks. While I'm cutting walleyes into chunks, stir this a little bit more. This is close. Got to get a little more liquid out of that. Then after we start the roux with the flour, then what we'll do from there is we will slowly add in our milk. I'll turn the burner down a little bit so the milk doesn't curdle on me. And we will get this going. And after this is going, it's got to simmer for about 30 minutes with the potatoes in it. Because the fish won't go in until the last 6 to 8 minutes of cooking the chowder. Because if you throw it in before that, then it gets pretty rough. They'll overcook. It just won't taste very good. So they're ready. I need to start to drop my flour in here real quick. There we go. We're getting what we want. I'm going to turn this down now to about where I want it to be. Now, as soon as we get this going, we're going to move it over to the stove. And then we're going to start getting our tomatoes ready and everything for the next dish. So what I need to do now is I need to grab a whisk and grab my milk. And you've got to slowly whisk this in. If you've ever made gravy, you do not want a lot of clumps in your... Because really, chowder is a really thick, wonderful milk-based soup And we're using whole milk. We're not using 2% or anything like that.
Does it make a difference if you use 2% milk?
It won't be nearly as rich and flavorful, in my opinion. You're not going to get that. Chowder is a nice, thick, hearty soup. That 2% milk just really wouldn't do it. I don't think I'd go up to heavy whipping cream by no means, but maybe there's people that do. I just don't. I just use whole milk, and it turns out a lot better. So now that we've got that, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add the bacon. Stir that in. And I'll tell you what, like I said, we cut the recipe down because how many people we have. I didn't cut the bacon down much.
That's a good thing.
You shouldn't cut bacon down, in my opinion. So now what we're going to do, add our potatoes in there. Stir that up. Now, I'm going to move this over to the stove, and if you look at that, that looks really good. So that's going to thicken up and cook these potatoes. I'm going to put this over here on to start until I see it warm up nice. On medium low is what I call it, heat for the moment. So we are going to move this fish into this bowl where our potatoes were. And I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Just because I was messing with that fish and I really don't want to spread that around.
Do you do much fishing in the fall?
Oh, I do as much as I can. The only problem with fishing in the fall is that's when bird season is.
Yeah, that can be a conflict.
And so we have a tendency to not fish as much. Have a tendency to do a little more bird hunting. As you can tell, I'm flipping back and forth to menus. That way I don't get my two menus mixed, or recipes mixed up. Grab me a different cutting board here. That way I'm not contaminating anything. So what we're going to do now is we are going to grab a bowl. And we are going to dice up 10 ounces of cherry tomatoes, which Gary provided out of his garden. Okay, we're back. We had to take a little bit of a pause for a moment, and Gary is going to be nice enough to hold the camera. My wife, I forgot something and she had to go get it. Imagine that. So what I'm doing right now is I am cutting the cherry tomatoes that we're going to roast in the oven. We have our oven set at 375. And if you want, this is the next one. Walleye with balsamic roasted cherry tomatoes. So that is the next one we are cooking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice these tomatoes up, throw them in this dish. I've already diced the 3 cloves of garlic. I'm gonna put a tablespoon of olive oil in here. I've already lined a small baking dish cookie sheet with parchment paper, excuse me. So, and here is the basil leaves. So we're gonna slice these up. Julienne them is the phrase in the recipe. Get these nice. I'm gonna more chop them than julienne them. Put those in there. Now on the thyme, I call it thyme, I get scolded for it. It calls out for 2 teaspoons of the leaves. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to strip the leaves off and just drop them right down in here. If you grab it at the top and gently pull down, if you don't break the top like I just did, grab it and gently pull down, the leaves will just come right off that stem like that. So you just grab that, gently pull down like this, and you will get all the leaves off that stem. And I like to give them a little twist. So what it calls out for is 2 teaspoons. And I am just about there with the teaspoons.
How's the chowder coming along?
I'm gonna jump back there real quick. I'm glad you mentioned that, Gary. I dropped the stem down there. Let me get that out of there. Chowder needs to be turned up just a touch. Get it going. Now keep in mind, we're cooking this chowder for about 30 minutes until the potatoes soften. So I've turned that up just a little bit. So I'm just going to get a little bit more thyme in this. Thyme. Sorry. There we go. So, now, the other 2 things that go into this are 2 tablespoons of brown sugar and 3 cloves of minced garlic. Now the brown sugar should be pressed into or packed into the tablespoons. And I am going to go ahead and add about a tablespoon of olive oil to this. Just about that. And then we're going to toss it around. Get that good and tossed around here. This is what it should look like after you've tossed it. And we are going to put it on a cookie sheet I get from myself with some parchment paper. Get those spread out a little bit. Now what we'll do with this, once we're done, is we will top our walleye with it. So, I've got the oven at 375. We're going to slide these tomatoes into the oven And they are going to be in there for about 20 minutes.
That's too many buttons.
Yes, it is. I think it's counting. I guess we'll find out. So, in about 20 minutes. So I'm going to go back and check on our chowder, which is getting nice and hot.
Ooh, yum. That looks wonderful.
Oh, yeah. So, I'm going to rinse this walleye off real fast. Back to the cutting board. So, rinse this plate. So we're only going to season this walleye with salt and pepper. And that's it. But before we do that, what we're going to do is we are going to pat it dry. The reason you pat it dry is to take out all the excess moisture from water, anything that you've soaked it into. And by doing this, you're going to get a better flavor out of your fish. So, right there, salt and pepper. I'm going to wash my hands before I tip them into the salt and pepper jar. Gary's giving you a good view of apron strings while I'm over there getting cleaned up. So just salt and pepper it lightly. And then what we'll do is after we salt and pepper this, then we will set them off to the side until the cherry tomatoes are done. We're using kosher salt just because it's a little more coarse, and we're using a coarse pepper as well.
Have you ever tried sea salt with it?
Yeah. I'm one of those type of people that really can't tell much difference. Maybe that's unusual, but that's just kind of me. Go. Hello. We paused it for a little bit so I could catch up. I'm going to squeal on myself. I forgot to add the balsamic vinegar and the red peppers to the tomatoes, so we quickly pulled them out, and I added the quarter of a teaspoon of red pepper flakes and a half teaspoon of balsamic vinegar to the tomatoes. Toss them around, put them back in the oven. They'll turn out great. What we're going to do here real quick is I'm going to go ahead and double check this chowder. Checking. What I'm doing is I'm checking to see if the potatoes are just starting to soften. Okay, I don't want them mush, but I want them to just start to soften. As soon as they start to soften, I'll put the fish in. What we're going to do is, our tomatoes are going to be done here very quickly. I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of butter to this pan. We're going to get it melted up, and as soon as it melts, we will add the, and there goes my tomatoes. Now look at that. Isn't that beautiful?
Looks good. Smells good too.
And we're going to set these over here so they can soak up a little more of those juices right before we use them, because cooking this fish, it is not going to take long. You're looking at 2 minutes aside max on the fish. And these fish are nice and cut nice and thin. They're going to work out really great. I think they're going to be about a minute to a minute and a half aside. Technology.
Steven doesn't know how to run it.
We had to take another commercial break. Technology beat me up again. So what we're going to do is we are now going to add our walleye fillets to the butter. What we're looking for is an opaque color on the walleye. You can smell it. Smells really good. Again, see how our tomatoes have absorbed a little bit of that with the spices and the herbs? So as soon as that is done, what we will do is we will generously add these tomatoes onto the walleye. See how nice and brown that is? See how it's starting to separate? See how that's starting to separate? See that nice browning of that fish? And this butter is just, one thing I'll tell you is don't use margarine, use butter. It'll be a lot better. And I'll tell you what, if you could smell it in here, it's amazing. This fish smells amazing. I've got to check my chowder again. It is really close. What I'm going to do is I'm going to platter these up on a platter, and I'm going to put the tomatoes and sauce over the top of it, and then we'll pull off that platter. So Gary,
Yes.
how long does it normally take you to take a person to get their dog through all the NAVDA training?
It's about actually maybe a 3.5 year process, just depending on how often you go to the training sessions, how dedicated you are to working with the dog. A lot of it really depends on how much time you have to work with the animal.
So what you're telling me is because you're retired, you got time.
I do have time to work with my dog.
Gary's retired. He's so lucky.
I spend a lot of time with him.
Yes, you do. I'm going to plate these up on this platter. If I don't drop them, basically what this would be considered is kind of a family style plating. And for you people that love the farm to table, farm to fork philosophy, or the hunter-gatherer philosophy, this definitely falls into that, because most of this right here was gathered up through Gary fishing. These tomatoes Gary raised in his own garden. This is one. Most of this is what Gary has provided to this show today. And we greatly appreciate it, Gary. Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
And as I said, as our shows progress through this year, our next show is planned to be smoked duck. We're going to go ahead and smoke a duck, and then we're going to show you the ways in which you can cook it. We're going to smoke the duck at a very low heat to infuse it with the smoked flavor, and then we're going to come in and show you the options you have with that duck after you've smoked it to infuse that flavor into it. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go ahead and add our fish. I'm going to switch here real quick. Bring this over here so everybody can see it a little better. Go ahead and take a good look at that. So we're going to go ahead and add our fish to this. After we add our fish, we're looking at 6 to 8 minutes of cook time. So look how thick and hearty that is. That is a very, very thick chowder. So we're going to go ahead and add our fish. We're going to cook that for 6 to 8 minutes. And I'm going to throw a lid on it, like I've had it on the stove, so we don't lose too much of that wonderful flavor of the fluids. We want it a little juicier than what it is currently. Okay, one of the other things you want to put around this fish dish is there's enough here for about 4 people. Put a couple slices of lemon around there. That way, if a person wants some lemon with their fish, they can go ahead and pull a little lemon off, squeeze it over their fish, and that would be a good family-style dish for about 2 to 3 people. So what I'm going to do real quick is I am going to taste our chowder and see if it needs a little bit more salt or pepper. One of the other things you notice, if you look at this, this is a little thinner than it was before. And the reason it's a little thinner than what it was before is it got a little thicker than it should have, okay? And when it did that, I just added a tablespoon of milk to it, and I stirred it real good to make sure it blended in and did not get clumpy or nasty. So I'm going to taste this. I've got salt and pepper right here, just in case I think I need to add a little bit more. And I do. Oh yeah. So I'm gonna. It's lacking salt in this case for me. Now each person is a little different. They may not want it as salty as I do or as peppery as I do, but for me, it was lacking salt drastically. And that's a good thing about making a chowder. When you're making a chowder or any kind of soup or any kind of meal, you can season it as you like it or as your guests like it. Keep in mind, I can leave it what I consider to be bland, and I could let Gary go ahead and season it and salt and pepper it as he wishes. The only problem with letting somebody do that is they might overdo it. So you gotta really try to get your dish as perfect as you can before you serve it to anybody. So because I don't want anybody eating after me, I'm gonna come over here and grab another spoon, and I'm gonna try this. That is a lot better. We're gonna leave it right there. So we're ready to serve this. And what we've got here, we've got nice big bowls. And I'll tell you, the recipe tells you to top this with parsley. I'm not a big fan of parsley. Nothing wrong with it. Other people love parsley. I'm not a huge fan of it. So I've got celery in here. And when you get celery, you end up with nice leaves, nice celery leaves. So I'll top each one of these bowls with a little bit of celery leaves. And then I've got a couple little celery sticks just to add a little bit of a color flavor to it. And then there you go. So what we're going to do is come around here. Is we're going to go ahead and let Gary serve himself up, and we're going to let him take that first couple bites.
Gladly. That's really tasty.
Try those tomatoes.
Really
let us know
good.
how that turned out.
Mm.
So, did those tomatoes suck up all those nice
They really did.
spices
There's a lot of sweetness to them.
yeah?
It really adds to the tomato flavor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
Good.
really good. Really super good.
Well, stop eating tomatoes and try our chowder.
I want to eat this. Chowder looks wonderful. It's just the right consistency, really.
Good.
Mmm. Those potatoes are perfect.
Good.
Done just right. Have a little fish here. Mmm. Really good.
Good.
Wonderful.
We're going to let you go now. Keep in mind, State Fair is going on here in Hutchinson, Kansas, Central Kansas. If you live in Kansas and you live half a state away and you're coming down to the fair, make sure you take the opportunity to stop by here at Apron Strings on Main Street, where they have a lot more than what they're going to have at the fair. And Gary's drooling. And so as you look around, they have a lot of stuff here at the Apron Strings. And take the opportunity to come by. They're a fantastic group of people to work with. They're fantastic sponsors of Pheasants Forever as well. We do cooking classes here. We actually do cooking classes for Pheasants Forever here. And if you're interested in cooking classes for Pheasants Forever and you live in the surrounding counties of Reno County or Reno County and Hutchinson, or excuse me, in Kansas, feel free, contact Apron Strings, find out when their next wild game cooking class is, because that's what we teach through the Pheasants Forever course, is a wild game cooking class. And we teach it right here, Main Street, Hutchinson, Kansas. And keep in mind, if you ever have the desire and the opportunity to come to Central Kansas for an upland game hunt, contact CQ Gamebirds. We'd be loved to have you come down, hunt with us, and maybe if you ask nice, we'll cook you a really good meal. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you next month.